Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Archie, Benny. Estella finally broke into a smile. Archie and Benny were also excited to be reunited with Estella. The children sat together and observed each other as though it was their first meeting. A while later, Archie frowned and asked, Didn't Mr. Farwell take good care of you? You seem to have lost some weight." Estella's cheeks were obviously not as chubby as before. Upon hearing that, Estella gave her own cheeks a pinch and smiled adorably. She tilted her head in contemplation before responding with a slight whisper, I guess it's because I was in low spirits." The boys stared at her anxiously. Did Mr. Farwell bully you?" Estella's mood had improved considerably when the boys appeared, and she found herself unable to contain her joyful grin. She stuck her tongue out mischievously. It's because I didn't get to see Miss Jarvis and you both. Daddy made me angry, so he dared not upset me further." Archie and Benny relaxed at her answer. Benny couldn't resist asking in concern, "Ms. Ward told us Mr. Farwell wants to transfer you to another school. Is that true?" Estella gave a slight nod, followed by a shake of her head. "Yes, I've been transferred to a new school, but I only stayed there for one day." The boys were confused. Estella puffed her cheeks and added, I don't like that school. I want to be with you both." Archie and Benny couldn't bear to see her disappointment, so they quickly comforted her. "Shall we want to be with you, too?" Benny raised his arm in a rush to console her, only for his sleeves to roll down and expose the wound on his arm. Estella immediately spotted the scar. She frowned in concern and demanded, What is this? What happened?" Benny flashed a guilty smile. I fell down accidentally. Mommy has already tended to it." He slowly rolled down his sleeve and put his hand back down. Estella pouted unhappily when she heard him mention Roxanne. "It has been a long time since I last saw Miss Jarvis." Benny belatedly realized he had said the wrong thing and cast a look in Archie's direction, silently asking him for help. Archie had no idea how to salvage the situation. Roxanne didn't want to see Estella, and no amount of persuasion would make her change her mind. When the boys were racking their brains to figure out a way to change the topic, Estella suddenly perked up. Why don't you take me with you?" she suggested. Before Archie and Benny realized what she meant, she inched nearer to them and tugged at their sleeves, pleading, "Could I please come with you to your house so I can meet Miss Jarvis?" The boys couldn't bring themselves to say no as she was staring at them imploringly. They agreed readily. Sure. However, you must be obedient." Estella bobbed her head obediently. After the three kids played in the room for some time, Estella glanced at the clock and urged, Let's go. Daddy is going to come back anytime soon." Hearing that, Archie and Benny got to their feet hastily. It would be hard for them to bring Estella with them once Lucian came home. The kids sneaked out of Estella's room quietly. Benny was the first to head downstairs to divert Catalina's attention. "Miss Catalina, I'd like some water." He gazed at Catalina and blinked innocently. Catalina felt her heart melt, and she quickly turned around to pour him a cup of water without hesitation. Archie took the chance to sprint out of the mansion with Estella in tow. They then hid in a corner and waited for Benny to leave. Inside the mansion, Catalina had just poured a cup of water for Benny and assumed he was about to go upstairs. To her surprise, Benny gave her a polite bow. "Thank you, Miss Catalina. I shall take my leave now." Catalina frowned in puzzlement. What about Archie?" They both came together, so she couldn't understand why they would leave separately. Benny pursed his lips guiltily. "Archie left a while ago. He and I snuck in here without telling Mommy, and we were busted. She's probably giving him an earful right now." Catalina nodded understandingly. She found their antics amusing. "I can't believe they came this far just to visit a friend. Miss Jarvis must be beside herself with worry." She suddenly recalled what happened previously and offered, I'll ask someone to give you a ride home. Benny waved his hands anxiously. No need for that. My mommy is waiting for me outside. He stammered out a lie. Catalina didn't ponder over his words and nodded. Be careful. Benny bobbed his head obediently and trotted out of the mansion. Once he was outside, he quickly ran toward Archie and Estella. Archie waved at them. Let's go. The other two agreed and trailed dutifully behind him. After they exited the manor, Archie and Benny were especially vigilant. They had Estella with them, so it would be bad for them to encounter the older children they previously met. Fortunately, they didn't come across those kids throughout their journey and successfully arrived at the junction. After finishing her tasks, Catalina belatedly remembered that she had forgotten to invite the boys to stay for lunch. She assumed they had arrived home by now. Without thinking much, she went upstairs to get Estella. However, there was no response even after she knocked on the door for some time. Miss Estella? Can I come in now? Catalina asked worriedly. She carefully pushed the door open to realize that the room was empty. There was no one in sight. Catalina's heart sank to the bottom of her stomach. Miss Estella? She raised her voice. She searched the room frantically, but to no avail. Just as she was about to call the bodyguards to search the surroundings downstairs, an idea dawned on her. Benny's actions seemed weird. Did Miss Estella leave with them both? The thought of that possibility startled Catalina. I let Mr. Farwell down by failing to look after Miss Estella when he entrusted her to me this morning before leaving for work. She managed to slip away while I was on duty. Feeling both guilty and remorseful, Catalina instantly contacted Lucian. Meanwhile, Lucian was listening to Caden reporting the work progress in his office. When he received Catalina's call, he assumed Estella was throwing a tantrum again. Mr. Farwell, Miss Estella left with Archie and Benny. Catalina told him apologetically. A scowl appeared on Lucian's face when he learned about that. Caden became aware that the temperature in the office had dropped below the minimum. He regarded his employer's expression warily. I wonder what happened to Miss Estella. A while later, he sensed the temperature rising back to normal. Lucian said, I got it. I'll pick her up there later. His voice was deep as usual. With that, he ended the call. Caden was confused as he had no idea what just happened. Why did Mr. Farwell's mood fluctuate? Mere moments after Catalina hung up, Sonia arrived at the Farwell residence. Mrs. Farwell. Both Lucian and Estella weren't around, so she didn't know how to deal with Sonia. Sonia gave a curt nod and glanced around the living room. Where is Essie? Catalina was at a loss for words. She could tell Lucian that the boys had taken Estella away, but she was too afraid to tell Sonia the truth. After all, she knew that Sonia disliked Roxanne. Miss Estella, Catalina hesitated. Sonia grew impatient. Where is she? Is she upstairs? I'll go take a look myself. With that, she strode upstairs. Catalina dared not say anything and could only watch as Sonia headed upstairs to Estella's room. A while later, Sonia stormed downstairs wearing an unhappy scowl. I thought Essie is supposed to be homeschooled. Why isn't she around on a weekend? She demanded. Giving Catalina a dubious look, she asked, Did Lucian take her out? She pulled out her phone to call Lucian. Knowing it was impossible to hide the truth, Catalina revealed honestly. Archie and Benny came earlier. I think Miss Estella left with them. Sonia's expression turned as dark as thunder. So who told you to let them in? I didn't tell Lucian to bring Essie back so she could meet the boys. It's pretty obvious where they would take her. Sonia's voice was shrill and demanding. When Catalina heard Sonia's question, she was filled with guilt since she had let the boys in secretly. She hung her head in shame silently. Sonia glared at her. I can't believe you failed to take care of her. With that, she stormed out of the manor. I brought her back the first time, so I can do it again. After witnessing Sonia's departure from the manor, Catalina hesitated briefly before dialing Lucian's number once again. Back in Farwell Group's CEO's office, Caden was still reporting the work progress to Lucian. It was his first time seeing Lucian answering so many calls at work. Mrs. Farwell came earlier. She learned that Ms. Estella was taken away and might be. Catalina trailed off helplessly. Lucian's brows furrowed. I got it. He ended the call and told Caden, just send the rest to my email. Before Caden could react, he noticed Lucian rising to his feet and hurrying toward the elevator. Lucian's expression was grim as he exited the elevator and got into his car. He then proceeded to drive to Roxanne's house. Previously, Estella couldn't stop wailing when his mother forcibly dragged her out of Roxanne's house. He was worried that if Estella experienced another traumatic event, she would regress back to her old self. She might even completely isolate herself from the outside world. Lucian's expression darkened when the thought of that possibility crossed his mind. He stepped on the gas pedal. At the same time, the kid's car rolled to a stop outside the mansion. It had been a while since Estella had seen Roxanne, so the little girl was a bit anxious. She trailed behind the boys, wondering if Roxanne would still like her. The boys had no idea what was on her mind and dragged her into the mansion. Roxanne had just arrived home after working overtime. She was about to head upstairs to see Archie and Benny. Right then, the mansion's door creaked open, and in walked the three kids, holding hands. Roxanne thought she was hallucinating when she saw Estella at her house. Miss Jarvis, Estella greeted softly. Nevertheless, the little girl was too afraid to approach her. Roxanne snapped out of her reverie. The sight of Estella's shy demeanor made her heart soften. Upon realizing Roxanne didn't feel any animosity towards her, Estella leaped into her arms happily. Smiling, Roxanne wrapped her arms around Estella and asked gently, "Why are you with Archie and Benny?" Hearing her question, Archie and Benny exchanged a sheepish glance before directing their gaze toward Estella. Should we let Essie tell Mommy we sneaked her out, or should we tell her ourselves? It has been a while since Mommy and Essie last met. She won't get mad at Essie. Estella didn't disappoint them, for she quickly revealed, Archie and Benny came to visit me. I wanted to visit you, so I asked them to bring me here. Her voice sounded smug. Luckily, I followed them back. Otherwise, there is no telling when I'll get to meet Ms. Jarvis. Roxanne stiffened when she heard Estella's answer. Essie ran away from home with Archie and Benny. If Lucian finds out about it, how should I explain it to him? He'll most probably assume the boys persuaded Essie to follow them back to my house. With that thought in mind, she released her hold on Estella slowly. Panic flashed across Estella's face. Miss Jarvis, don't get mad. Roxanne patted her head comfortingly and explained, I have to inform your dad that you're here. Otherwise, he'll be concerned. Estella muttered reluctantly, I don't want Daddy. Daddy was the one who refused to let me see Ms. Jarvis, Archie, and Benny. Upon seeing Estella's reaction at the mention of her dad, Roxanne felt troubled. She could finally understand Sonia and Aubrey's feelings. Estella had a much stronger attachment to her than she did to Lucian. Therefore, it was understandable that they did not want the little girl to continue getting in touch with Roxanne. Roxanne even came to the conclusion that they were correct, as Estella would soon be someone else's daughter. As a mother herself, she wouldn't want her child to have a close relationship with another woman. However, Roxanne couldn't bring herself to ignore Estella, especially when the latter was pouting pitifully. Be good. I'll talk to your daddy nicely, she said and forced out a smile. Roxanne stood up to make a call to Lucian. She had just scrolled through her contacts and found Lucian's number when the doorbell rang. Hearing that, Roxanne paused in her tracks. Estella clung to Roxanne's leg like a frightened little animal and hid behind her. She thought Lucian was here to bring her back home. Roxanne gave her head a reassuring pat and went to answer the door. The sight of the newcomer caused them to blanch in shock. Estella was so flustered that she grasped the edge of Roxanne's clothes tightly, desperately wanting to conceal herself completely behind Roxanne. Archie and Benny pursed their lips and went to join Roxanne at the door. Sonia's lips twisted mockingly as she observed their actions. She then directed her gaze toward Roxanne. Catalina informed me that your boys had sneaked Essie out of the house, so I came here to verify if it was true. Turns out Essie is indeed at your house. Roxanne furrowed her brows and refuted. Archie and Benny simply brought Essie back here so that they could play together. They are just children, so please be mindful of your words. Claiming that the kids sneaked Estella out of her house was too serious an accusation. Sonia pinned her with a withering stare. Why? Did I say anything wrong? Sonia turned her attention to Estella, who was hiding behind Roxanne. Essie, come on. I'll bring you home. Estella had a firm grip on the edge of Roxanne's clothing. When she heard Sonia's words, she recoiled in fear. I've just met Ms. Jarvis, so I don't want to go home yet. Besides, Grandma looks really scary. I just didn't want to attend the new kindergarten, that's all, but she wants to discipline me like the cruel Miss Pearson. Estella was overwhelmed by fear as she remembered Sonia's expression from that day. Sonia realized that Estella was frightened of her, so she apologized softly. I'm here to apologize, Essie. I must have scared you that day, haven't I? I promise it won't happen again. You're my precious princess, Essie. She reached out and tried to pry away Estella's hand that was gripping Roxanne's clothes. It was frustrating to see her granddaughter preferring another woman over her. At once, Archie and Benny dashed forward to stand in front of Roxanne and protect Estella. This time, they wouldn't let Sonia bring Estella away no matter what. Won't you control your kids? Sonia shot an irritated glare at Roxanne. They first sneaked Essie out of the Farwell residence, and now they are trying to prevent me from bringing her back. Why? Do they consider Essie to be their real sister? Conflicting emotions welled up in the boys' hearts when they heard that. We don't know who Essie's mommy is, but we are indeed her half-siblings. With that thought in mind, they grew increasingly determined to protect her. Roxanne was also reminded of the kids' relationship, but she didn't know how to reply to Sonia. As Roxanne remained silent, Sonia took a step forward and attempted to push the boys out of her way. Instinctively, Roxanne reached out to protect her children by gripping Sonia's wrist. Both women were at a standstill for a moment before Sonia withdrew her hand with a scowl. She stated coldly, like mother, like son. It's no wonder they are so mischievous, given that you are their mother. Roxanne believed that she had raised both boys well, so she felt a stab of anger upon hearing Sonia's criticism. Mrs. Farwell, you can criticize me all you like, but isn't it rude of you to vent your anger on the kids? Sonia valued her pride the most, and Roxanne's words had hit her sore spot. What did you just say? She shrieked. Unfazed, Roxanne said, you claim to feel sorry for Essie, but have you ever considered why Essie is afraid of you if you truly love her? It's because your supposed love is just fulfilling your own ego. Sonia was practically quivering in rage. She looked at her granddaughter, wanting to refute Roxanne's statement with facts. However, Estella merely cowered behind Roxanne silently. Her behavior seemed to verify Roxanne's statement instead of supporting Sonia. I already told you last time that Essie can't handle stress, but you kept forcing her to act against her wishes. I doubt that you love her, Roxanne stated firmly. She piled on the pressure, not giving Sonia any room to maneuver. Sonia flew into a fit of anger. You know nothing. Who are you to question me? Essie is a Farwell, so it's up to us to decide how we want to raise her. That has nothing to do with you. Roxanne felt that this was unjust for Estella. Just because Essie is a Farwell, does that mean she should be treated this way and not be allowed to befriend people she likes? Sonia sneered. If you're talking about your sons, then she isn't allowed to befriend them. A flash of disappointment crossed Archie and Benny's faces when they heard that. Does Grandma hate us that much? She won't even allow us to be friends with Essie. Roxanne was upset, too. Mrs. Farwell, the children have nothing to do with our grudge. Roxanne knew that the elderly lady's hatred for Archie and Benny must have stemmed from her, for they rarely interacted with Sonia. With that thought in mind, she cast the boys an apologetic look. Though the boys had no idea about their own background, their biological grandmother ended up despising them because of her. For one split second, Roxanne had the urge to reveal Archie and Benny's identities to Sonia so she would stop insulting her boys. Sonia was not interested in arguing with Roxanne. Her attention was focused on Estella as she coaxed, come on, Essie. Let's go home." Frightened by their argument, Estella shook her head vigorously in response to Sonia's words, her eyes reddened in fear. "No. I don't want to leave. I want to stay and play with Archie and Benny." A fresh swell of rage rose within Sonia when she realized Estella wasn't going to listen to her. Initially, she wanted to apologize to Estella for yelling at her previously. Alas, she never imagined that Estella would choose Roxanne over her. Blind with rage, Sonia stepped forward with an ugly scowl, intending to push Roxanne away. Roxanne held the kid's hands and retreated warily. Sonia was about to make a move when a car honked outside the mansion. Roxanne instinctively glanced toward the source of the noise and saw Lucian alighting from his car. He strode over to them. From afar, he was giving off an intimidating air. Roxanne's heart sank at the sight. If Lucian insists on taking Essie with him, I can't stop him. Feeling helpless, she abandoned her defensive attitude and allowed herself to relax. Sensing the change in Roxanne's attitude, Sonia stopped warily and turned over her shoulder. The sight of her son gave her confidence. Lucian, I'm glad you're here. You must be here to pick Essie up, right?" Roxanne cast her gaze downward, unsure of how to face him. Lucian frowned slightly and said nothing. Sonia shook her head in disbelief and added, I can't believe those boys. They must have said something to Essie to make her follow them willingly. I'm not happy about this at all. I think it would be best if Essie stayed with me." Estella's eyes widened in shock when she heard that. She promptly burst into tears. Instantly, all eyes were upon her. No. Estella wailed so hard that she couldn't even open her eyes wide. I want Miss Jarvis. She wanted Roxanne, so it was obvious what she didn't want. Despite being humiliated, Sonia had to make an effort to restrain her anger in her son's presence. To try and comfort Estella, she coaxed, come on, stop crying. I'll buy you a present if you follow me home. Anything you want, I promise." Estella wrapped her arms around Roxanne's leg tightly and said nothing. She merely shook her head vigorously while bawling. There were several instances where Roxanne wanted to speak, but she decided to keep silent after remembering what Sonia said. The fact that Lucian was at the scene as well did not help. On the other hand, Archie and Benny were incredibly anxious. Stop it, Mrs. Farwell. Essie is crying her eyes out," exclaimed Benny, who was on the brink of bursting into tears himself. Pursing his lips, Archie quietly walked to the middle of Benny and Estella to hold their hands. Lucian stood opposite the four with a deadpan expression, only half a step behind Sonia. Seeing how protective the two boys were of Estella and how Roxanne remained silent, Lucian frowned once again. Even if you don't want me, you should have no problem going with your father, right?" Sonia thought she was being quite reasonable, but as soon as she finished her sentence, she heard her son's indifferent voice. Stay out of this. I'll take Essie back," uttered Lucian. When Roxanne heard that, she reluctantly shut her mouth. Then, she glanced coldly at Roxanne and Lucian before turning around to walk away. She had something to say but would rather not do it in front of Roxanne, lest she got humiliated right before the younger woman. Well aware of what was on his mother's mind, Lucian quickly followed her. Were you aware that the two little ones went to the manor? It questioned Sonia as she looked suspiciously at her son. To that, Lucian answered straightforwardly, I was working overtime at the office, so I had no idea. Then why are you here? Sonia did not believe her son, but then she suddenly thought of something. Did Catalina tell you that I came over? It questioned Sonia displeasedly. Lucian did not answer the question directly, however. Not only does Essie have a sensitive personality, but she also hasn't been doing well recently. It won't take much to trigger a relapse. Do you think that was what I was trying to do? After listening to Lucian, Sonia got upset. I'm Essie's grandmother. Why wouldn't I want the best for her? Roxanne was the one who heartlessly abandoned Essie, so what right does she have now to take the girl under her wing? Besides, Essie will be Aubrey's daughter sooner or later. There's no point in letting the girl get close to an outsider. At that point, Lucian felt as if he was about to have a headache. If you really want the best for her, just go back now. Sonia did not expect that instead of siding with her, her son would try to drive her away. Did you forget how Roxanne treated Essie? The girl may not have any idea, but are you just as oblivious? Knitting his eyebrows, Lucian chose to keep silent. Sonia would rather not waste more time arguing with her son, so she stated, I'll go back now, but if I don't see Essie when I return to the manor tomorrow, there's nothing you can say to stop me from taking her back to the Farwell main residence. With that, Sonia shot another cold glance at Roxanne before turning around to leave. Lucian then took a few seconds to recollect himself before heading for the mansion door. Mr. Farwell, she greeted Roxanne distantly, for she had no idea why Lucian came over. At first, she thought he wanted to help Sonia take Estella away, but after witnessing how he convinced Sonia to leave, she was utterly baffled. In response to Roxanne's greeting, Lucian simply glanced indifferently at her before shifting his attention to Estella, who had reduced her bawling to sniveling after Sonia left. Sorry, Mr. Farwell, voiced Archie suddenly. When Lucian heard that, he looked at Archie with a raised eyebrow since he knew what the boy was apologizing for. What Archie said next was also well within his expectation. We know we shouldn't have taken Essie away secretly, but we missed her a lot. Do you think you could let her stay a while longer? Even though Roxanne and Lucian knew what Archie would say, they were still moved when they heard the boy actually put his thoughts into words. After looking down at Archie, Roxanne silently shifted her gaze to Lucian. If possible, I, too, wish Essie could stay a moment longer, at least until she calms down. Unfortunately, she knew she had no right to make such a request. Only after keeping quiet for a few seconds did Lucian turn to meet Roxanne's gaze. Clenching her fists, Roxanne then looked away and pretended to be calm. What do you think, Ms. Jarvis? Inquired Lucian in his deep voice. Roxanne reluctantly replied, I have no say in the matter since Essie is your child, Mr. Farwell. However, I do hope that you'll respect her wishes. Since Roxanne did not intend to request him to let Estella stay, Lucian nodded understandingly in response and turned to Estella. Then you should come home with me. Estella had just stopped crying, but after hearing her father's words, her face began to scrunch up again. Seeing how the girl was about to burst into tears once again, Benny and Archie got upset at Lucian. Daddy knew Essie isn't in a good mood, but he's still forcing her. If Essie doesn't want to go back, he protested Benny, confronting his father with determination. Lucian was somewhat surprised by the boy's sudden statement. Then, Archie also stepped forward to shield Estella with his body. Even though he did not utter a word, his intention was crystal clear. Instead of saying anything in response, Lucian simply looked silently at Roxanne, who was frowning slightly as soon as she noticed his gaze. The woman also wanted to say something for Estella's sake, but in the face of Lucian's attitude, she couldn't bring herself to say anything. Also, she was well aware she didn't have a say in the matter. He probably would have listened to me back when he was still pursuing me, but now that he's already with Aubrey. With that thought in mind, Roxanne was quickly filled with nothing but frustration. Archie, Benny, you guys go upstairs first and let Mr. Farwell talk to Essie. Roxanne persuaded the boys, who never expected her to say that. Estella, on the other hand, thought that Roxanne did not want her around anymore, so she began bawling again while grabbing the woman's sleeve tightly, refusing to let go. When the scene descended into chaos once again, Roxanne furrowed her eyebrows helplessly. Lucian, however, remained standing with a deadpan expression at the door, staring at Estella and waiting for her to come to him. It took quite a while before Roxanne finally found her voice. Mr. Farwell. Even though Roxanne didn't have the right to say anything, she could no longer remain silent when Estella was bawling. As Roxanne spoke, she reciprocated Estella's grip on her hand and found out that the little girl's palm was already sweating. Heartbroken, Roxanne stated, I know what you guys are thinking, but some things require time, especially considering Essie's condition. Then, Lucian spoke straightforwardly, his words striking the sore spot in Roxanne's heart. And who are you to concern yourself with Essie like that? The desire in Roxanne to speak up immediately dissipated when she heard Lucian. Her lips parted, but no words came out of her mouth. All she could do was tighten her grip on Estella's hand to comfort the girl. Then, Lucian shifted his attention to Estella. Come home with me. Mr. Lon will be coming over in the evening. Since Estella had been so emotionally unstable recently, Lucian decided to summon James for professional help. However, Estella shook her head vigorously in response and cried so hard that she could barely breathe properly. Miss Jarvis has a lot on her hands, so don't cause her any more trouble. Lucian bent down to grab Estella's unoccupied hand. Estella's strength was drained after bawling for a long time, so she let go of Roxanne's hand the moment Lucian took her in his arms. The woman instinctively tightened her grip but eventually let the girl go when she remembered the man's harsh words. With Estella in his arms, Lucian patted her comfortingly on the back before turning around to leave. Daddy! Suddenly, a childish voice cried out from behind and caused Lucian to stop dead in his tracks. Roxanne's expression changed as she regarded her son. Benny's voice was loud when he called Lucian that, and his face had turned bright red, probably due to anxiety. The moment the word left his mouth, Benny regretted his action. He knew he shouldn't have done that, but he had no idea how else to stop Lucian from leaving. At that moment, Benny did not have to lift his head to look at his mother because he could already sense her shocked gaze. Panicking, the boy then turned to his brother for help. Archie, knitting his eyebrows, pretended to be calm even though he was flustered as well. Mr. Farwell, you're Essie's father, yet you don't know what she needs? If a psychologist can actually help her, then why was she mute before she met us? Benny quickly chimed in, if we had a daddy, we wouldn't like it if he forced us to do things we don't want to do. The boy's words were enough to make the two adults waver once again, and Lucian began pondering. Benny's not wrong. If a psychologist were the solution, Essie wouldn't have refused to talk. However, how can I allow Essie to continue relying on Roxanne since she wanted nothing more than to cut ties with me? Roxanne, on the other hand, was still feeling apprehensive after Benny called Lucian a daddy. For a moment, she even thought the boy had found out about his true identity already. The next second, she was filled with intense guilt when she heard what Benny had to say. Lucian is the boy's father, and he's standing right in front of them. I just didn't tell them because I was selfish. Guilt-ridden, the woman glanced at Lucian because she was worried he would sense something. However, as soon as she lifted her head, she unexpectedly met Lucian's stern gaze. Roxanne wondered if her eyes were playing tricks on her when she noticed resentment in the man's eyes. Even if you need me to at that point, Roxanne could not help but speak up again. However, she glanced concernedly at Estella mid-sentence and decided to skip the rest. We need to be patient with Essie's condition. If necessary, I'll cooperate with you, Mr. Farwell. Roxanne knew the Farwell family wanted to distance Estella from her, so in order to make the process easier for Estella, she was willing to cooperate with the family to gradually cut down on the time she spent with the girl. Even though Archie and Benny had no idea what the adults were talking about, they had an uneasy feeling. Meanwhile, Estella was still crying since she was unsure what would happen to her. If possible, let Essie stay for today. Roxanne lowered her eyes and pleaded without much expectation. The second Archie and Benny heard that, their eyes lit up. The boys then stared expectantly at Lucian, whose face remained expressionless. Only after a while did the man finally speak. I'll leave her in your care then. Feel free to call me anytime should you have trouble handling her, and I'll come over to pick her up. Roxanne was dumbfounded since she did not expect Lucian to agree to their request so easily. She finally regained her senses when Estella came running toward her, sobbing after her father set her down on the floor. Miss Jarvis. The girl quickly wrapped her arms around Roxanne's thigh. After caressing Estella's head, Roxanne looked up at Lucian, who then nodded indifferently at her and glanced at the three children before heading to his car. Only after watching Lucian drive away did Roxanne take the children into the living room. You two look after Essie. I need to make a phone call, instructed Roxanne. Archie and Benny immediately nodded in response and did their best to comfort Estella, while Roxanne hurried into a corner to call Jack, who did not take long to answer. What's up, Miss Jarvis? Inquired Jack. Sorry, but I'm afraid I'll have to take another rain check, replied Roxanne apologetically. According to their schedule, the two were supposed to provide medical consultation at a nursing home that afternoon, but because of how upset Estella was, Roxanne could not leave. In response, Jack chuckled unconcernedly. It's okay. We can handle things there without you. What I'm more worried about is you. Are you sick? As soon as Jack finished his sentence, he could vaguely hear crying from the other end of the line. Are the boys the ones who are sick? Jack furrowed his eyebrows confusedly.
Ja, infine.
I just suddenly have a private matter to tend to, answered Roxanne after glancing at the bawling Estella. Jack did not overthink the situation and simply assumed that he guessed correctly. I'll let you get back to your private matter then. After Roxanne thanked Jack gratefully, the two ended the phone call without saying anything else. Then, Roxanne hurried back to the children. Mommy, we couldn't get Essie to stop crying. Benny had disappointment written all over his face. After patting the boy's head, Roxanne lowered herself to pick up Estella. It's okay now, Essie. You have Archie, Benny, and me here. As if she felt a sense of security in Roxanne's arms, Estella finally opened her tear-filled eyes to look at the woman. Roxanne quickly patted Estella on the back when she sensed a change in the girl's emotion, trying to calm her down so she wouldn't cry too hard. I don't want to transfer schools, uttered Estella, choking on her tears. Roxanne was relieved to hear Estella speak but quickly became distressed because of what the girl said. Even though Roxanne knew what Estella wanted, there was nothing she could do about it. Miss Jarvis. I want you, Miss Jarvis, voiced Estella as she continued to sob. Immediately, Roxanne responded, I'm here. I'm here with you. The two boys then climbed up the couch and carefully tugged Estella's sleeve. We're here too, so you don't have to cry anymore. Roxanne could not bear to see Estella cry again, so she decided to tell a white lie to appease the girl. I'll speak to your father about it. I want you to be my mommy, added the teary-eyed Estella. Gulping, Roxanne dared not promise Estella that. However, her heart could not help but break a little every time she heard the girl sob. Only after a while did Roxanne respond, I'll always like you no matter what our relationship is. Would you dislike me if I couldn't be your mother, Essie?
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.